Hello, and welcome to this very first episode of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. We are going to be recording and distributing this podcast as a toolkit, along with the actual written toolkit itself. Obviously, things in America are very intense, and I often hear people ask me the question, what can I do to save democracy? Well, with over 20 years of activism fighting exactly in these kinds of spaces, we have built a toolkit along with our community at our live show called Rebel Radio to help you do exactly that. So, welcome, friends, to the very first episode of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. This podcast is part of a larger toolkit that is available both here on Spotify and hopefully on your other favorite podcasting applications. But we're also setting up a Patreon so you can download the extended version of this episode as well as full content episodes of our live radio show, Rebel Radio, which broadcasts every other night at 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So, if you're like me, I know you're excited, probably a little bit nervous, but let me tell you this one thing. You are not alone. So, let's get this started. Let's get into Chapter 1 of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. There is much to fear. We live in America in a time of great uncertainty, when, if no one has told you this yet, we are sliding backwards into a form of Christian nationalist fascist presidential dictatorship. Fear abounds and grows in the streets. The journey to this place has encompassed multiple decades and multiple slides from the original promise of the country, the Constitution, and the Gettysburg Address. Friends, there is much to fear in these streets, whether that is far-right groups increasingly close to the federal government or masked men and women stealing people from the literal streets. By the way, men and women whose identity is unknown to us and who also, incidentally, even now national news coverage in the United States says, who are these people? But that's not it. We also have to fear the constant onslaught and loss of our rights, rights which we thought concrete and certain, rights which we almost certainly thought we would never have taken away from us, but which are eroding in front of us every single day. And we, of course, also have to fear for our friends and family as essential services are taken, diminished, or cut. In many ways, it feels as though generations are being stolen from us, right in front of our very eyes. But I really only fear one thing most of all. It's not a president or a government or a secret police. I fear that I will not finish this book in time. And so, it is with great urgency that I write Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. I have decades of experience as an activist and multiple wins under my belt. But I'm also not perfect, and I want to share with you the lessons I have learned from my imperfections. I want to share with you what I've learned to fundamentally shift and reshape what resistance in America looks like while we still have a chance. When and where I can, I've asked other experts to chime in and give you a practical blueprint of that resistance. But just as quickly as I am writing this guide, you must act. I will give you concrete steps to take, action items, bullet points, challenges, but you have to do them, and you have to do them now. So let us start the blueprint for emergency democracy. This guide is part historical documentation of the fall of democracy in America and part direct action blueprint, a sort of emergency field guide for saving democracy. Now, we traditionally take this approach by dealing with our democracy from the top down, addressing voting, say, for the president, or calling Congress when we're not satisfied with elections. We simply do not have time for this anymore. We have to act from the bottom up. And listen, nothing I tell you in this book or educate you about or encourage you to try is illegal as of the time of this writing. But I cannot promise you that in a year from now or 2 years from now, this government will not try to make forms of resistance or forms of speaking out against the state illegal. And so it is essential that we act quickly to preserve and protect democracy. This will not be an easy fight, and it is unlikely that we will win in the substantive forms that we may have imagined 5 years ago or 10 years ago. At this phase, we are triaging to save what we can. From this blueprint and from a bottom up reimagining of democracy in America, I believe if enough of us do this, we can fundamentally shape and change this country for the better. But that is not a promise, it is a hope. On Rebel Radio, we have a saying: don't have hope, do hope. So let me ask you a question. Why are you different? Well, if you're listening to this, it's probably because you were one of thousands of people who have asked me the same question. What do I do? People have become disillusioned with politicians and the traditional political structure. Many of you have taken to the streets in resistance, with varying success. Some of you or your friends have even been arrested in attempts to resist fascism and the growth of authoritarianism. The increasing power of our police state is making it difficult to resist. And because of this, most people simply do not. This alone makes you different. This alone makes you special. This alone makes you uniquely patriotic. In November of 2024, after the election and the rise of Donald J. Trump as President of the United States again, I felt increasing despair and the realization that the United States and its previous forms of democracy, which were always under great strain, could essentially collapse. Initially, my plan was to prepare to leave the United States to protect myself, my family, and my belief systems. Yet, because all around me I saw people unwilling to acknowledge what was happening, I chose a different path. I began to create short videos on the app TikTok. The premise of my videos was simple. I wanted to tell the stories of what would happen in America under the fall of democracy. But I also realized simple warnings or lectures were not good enough. So I created vivid fictional narratives about life in America after the fall of democracy. And I called it The Unraveling. Now, my initial video got only hundreds of views, most of whom were just previous friends or people who had followed my TikTok page, which had, by the way, been long dormant from previous political activism. However, someone started what was always key and essential to every movement and every resistance. You know, people often get credit for being the first one to a movement, or the first one to at a protest, or the first one to hold a sign, but that person is not the most essential person. The person that is most essential is the person who follows, the person who says, I've got your back. The person or next person, or the dozens of people who agree to join you in a protest, or the dozens of people who bail you out of jail, these are essential people for our revolution. The first protester is an essential patriot, but the first follower is the key to our essential movement. And so, after I posted that first TikTok video on The Unraveling, chronicling the future of life after the fall of democracy, an essential and important thing happened. A complete stranger, someone who I have never met, graced me with the kindness of two simple words. I'm in. I'm in. I did not know this at the time, but I needed to hear those words exactly at that moment. And that individual started the movement that became a viral internet sensation and helped me to find my voice in this time of hopelessness. As enough people began to see those stories and they realized that they were actually coming true, they could see this new form of democracy falling and metastasizing into a new version of America. I was finally able to begin to leverage that platform from The Unraveling to build on decades of previous civil engagement and activism. Yet, I always got the same question. What do I do? How do we stop this? And so, I built this for you to help guide you through this time of great uncertainty. I can't provide you any certainty about what lies ahead for you for democracy, but I can give you this blueprint on how to reshape and restore democracy, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. These lessons, they are essential, and you must exercise and practice them, or they will fail. And even though some of them are uncomfortable, I assume, well, for most of us, you have to bring others on board. This is how we ignite. This is how we save democracy. So, when someone challenged me to make a blueprint on how to do all of this, all I had to say was, I'm in. This is your invitation to resist. This is your call to action. The time for waiting is over. The time for building is now. We're listening to the first episode of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. Please stay tuned now for a very special second edition, the extended edition, which is available typically to subscribers on Patreon, but which I want you to have today at no charge. So please stay tuned and enjoy the extended session. Hi, and welcome to the extended version of episode 1 of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. This actually concludes the first section of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. Typically, if you were not a subscriber to the community, this is where the podcast would end. However, for the first episode, I did want to give you a free sneak peek into what it looks like to participate in the extended session of the podcast, which you can join on our Patreon community. By joining on Patreon, you have access to a few exclusive benefits. Number one, you're participating in supporting this crucial work that we're doing. I'm going to talk about that in the extended session here. The second is, if you're part of our Rebel Radio community, you can actually download the last 2 episodes of Rebel Radio because a lot of people want to participate, but I know that the show does run a little bit late. So you can download the last 2 episodes for a small fee to participate in the work that we're doing. So, for the first episode, and this first episode only, we're going to include the extended session totally for free. So enjoy that, see the extended benefit, but the one thing you're not going to get is those free downloads of Rebel Radio. All this is to say, I'm going to do my best to provide you with the essential tools at no charge because I believe in saving democracy. If you believe in the work I'm doing, I'm going to make the ask right now. Support the work that I'm doing. Subscribe and commit and help us grow this community. First of all, I want to say thank you. If you're listening to this portion of the podcast, it means that you're a member of the extended community. And that means that you've not only invested your time, energy, and efforts, you've also invested just a little bit of your own money in order to continue this resistance effort and fight. I take that very seriously and is personally quite hard for me to do things like ask people to contribute to the work that I'm creating. So my first extended episode session is just to level with you, to be very honest with you, that's very challenging for me. I'm sitting here on August 20th, Wednesday, August 20th. I had to take the entire day off just to clear my mental headspace, my own individual space, and that was very challenging for me. As someone who is autistic, I have a very set routine, and simply taking the entire day off from work to be able to do this was itself disruptive, but it was really the only way I could give you the fair and honest attention that is necessary to be able to provide and fully immerse myself in this work. All that is to say, it was uncomfortable for me, but that is really the point. We have to start getting uncomfortable now, today. The greatest sense of urgency that I would ask you to take from episode 1 of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise, is that we are simply out of time. Mere moments before we recorded today's episode, it was announced that Texas has passed its efforts to redistrict the state and essentially give 5 more congressional seats ostensibly to the Republican Party. The actions that preceded this, however, were absolutely devastating in the sweep of authoritarianism in the United States of America. Representative Nicole Colliers, if you're listening to this in the future, was prevented from leaving the Texas House because she refused to sign a permission slip, a piece of paper granting permission to be monitored around the clock by state police. There has quite honestly not been a more present and more visible image of not authoritarianism, because that to me, and I think to you as well if you're listening to this, is already very clear. What is now clear is actually relevant to what we talked about in chapter 1, the first follower. We now have, as of today, August 20th, this is a historic day. We have the first followers of fascism. And yes, I understand that there are plenty of people who support this administration and what they're trying to do, but it has officially moved itself into the last mechanism of defense that we have as citizens, which is into our state voting apparatus. Today, the first follower of fascism has found its way into the House in Texas. This is in spite of national outcry and significant outrage, and indeed, literally, possibly illegally imprisoning a woman in the Texas State House. I cannot underscore how unnerving I find this particular interaction, or how disturbed I am that her fellow Democrats simply chose to walk out the door willingly, surrendering their own free will to the whims of fascism. For what? Individual temporary comfort? The idea that they would get to go home to their loved ones, their friends and family? I would, if I could, challenge each one of them that relief was only a temporary relief, because the day that they will come from them to take them from their families has only been pushed further down the road. Leaving today, on this day, to leave Representative Colliers by herself was not a win, and it was not a bid at safety. It was an extension, a forgiveness, and a remittance to fascism. On this Wednesday, if I'm being honest with you, my sense of hope has been dampened just a little bit more than it might have been. But I do find some inspiration in knowing that it happened on this day, the day that I chose, along with all of you, to sit in front of this machine and to push myself to do something uncomfortable, to record a podcast to show you how we beat this thing. So I hope as you're listening to this, you remember where you were on that day, August 20th. It was about 4 p.m., 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, when the Texas House officially gerrymandered their entire state to meet the whims of the authoritarian. Remember how you feel, what you were thinking, what you were fearing, what you were hopeful for, and what you intended to do. And if the answer today was that you don't know what to do, what I hope you take away from that is the idea that you found yourself exactly the right place to be, here at Ignite, fighting fascism in the age of its rise. If you're not familiar with our nightly show, our bi-nightly show, we have a community called Rebel Radio, where we've been doing precisely this work for months. We meet every other night when we can on TikTok Live, on Twitch, and on Instagram to share this resistance blueprint. So, as much as you may feel discouraged by the actions of Texas or the gradual, if not scary advance of fascism in the United States of America, I want you to know that you are not alone. I need you to know that you are not alone. And I need you to find yourself the courage, whether that is August 21st or September 1st, whether that is February 1st of 2026. I need you to find your spirit, your resistance, and your fire, because we need it. We need you. Are you in? I'm silently guessing and hoping and praying in my head that you said yes. So I want to give you a few updates if you're just downloading your very first episode and you're part of the extended community. Number one, if for some reason you can't make it to Rebel Radio, as part of being in the extended community, you have the access to fully downloading the episodes of the previous night's Rebel Radio. You can do this by being part of the Patreon community. The intention there is to give you toolkits if you can't make the show. Having said that, I don't want you to miss the opportunity to be on the live show. I don't want you to use the fact that you can download the previous version of the show to prevent you from finding the time, even though I know it's late, to show up. Because it is the magic of our community's response, the connection that we make with each other, that allows us to do exactly what we're doing right now. I want you to have the toolkit. I want you to use the toolkit, especially when you can't make it. But I want you to find the strength, energy, and effort to make it every single time that you can. The first and most valuable lesson of chapter 1 here is we have to do it scared, we have to do it tired, and we have to do it even though we don't want to. Having said that, we very carefully vet people who do participate in the extended version of this episode and podcast. So if you're listening to this, it means that you made it past that first part, which is really, really important. In the live chat of the recording of this episode, someone jokingly said no feds. And I think that's an important thing to talk about because I've seen a lot of resistance communities trying to bubble up across the country right now. And what I inevitably see is I see people sort of afraid of the government right now. And so they're afraid to do things like protest or join a resistance group because they think it's a Fed. And, like that's a very valid concern to have. One of the tools that the authoritarian gets to wield without anybody asking them to is fear. They get to make you feel afraid. It costs them nothing other than that little space in your head. And so what you might not be able to see by listening to this podcast or by reading the material that we provided is the community that we've built on the back end. And what I would say to you is one simple thing. The type of people who support authoritarianism, especially this American version of authoritarianism in 2025, they are not the kind of people who give deference to the kindness of others and who willingly invest in caring for others. In other words, they're in it for themselves. If you're part of this community, I think that says enough about who you are, even though it's difficult to find the space, the place, and the effort to care for those other people. What I mean to say by this is it is natural and appropriate to not trust people right now. We live in a time when most of us feel, if you're logical, that you can't trust the government. And a basic ask of being a citizen of a country should be that you trust your government. That sort of fundamental rattling of your individual system of support, your individual sense of psychological safety is incredibly jarring. And if no one has made this connection for you yet, it is the reason that people are putting their heads down and they are pretending that this isn't happening. It's that exact reason. We are raised to anchor ourselves to psychological safety. And one of the tenets, the pillars, the core foundations of psychological safety is the idea, if you're fortunate enough to live in a, quote, first world country, that you have a government that is functioning in your best interest. It is quite clear to anyone with critical thinking skills, that is simply not the case in America. And it's not as much left versus right. If you really challenge yourself to see and understand what's happening in this country, it is the people who have access to everything trying to take what very little the rest of us have left. And if you can grapple with that and realize that part of that solution and part of solving this problem is to build community and not to tear other people down, then you will stop worrying as much about who you can and cannot trust and worry about who and what and where you can do the work of fighting fascism. So, it's okay if you don't trust me right now. My only ask is that you download the next episode and give me another chance. We'll see you on episode 2 of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of its Rise.